The Gauteng High Court in Pretoria has dismissed with costs the Lungu family's bid for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Now, the full bench High Court judgment that declared that the Zambian government is entitled to repatriate the remains of the late former Zambian President Edgar Lungu for the purposes of a state funeral and burial. Now, the family turned to the High Court, arguing, among other things, that this battle over the remains of the former president raised significant questions of law that needed to be resolved by the appellate court. The High Court, however, in its judgment, disagreed, finding that there were no reasonable prospects of success and that there are no compelling reasons that exist because the matter is so fact-specific that there's very little to no prospects that the same set of facts will confront a court again. The application was subsequently dismissed with costs. The family has the option of trying to petition the SCA. If it fails, they also have the option of the Con Court. Failure to exercise these options means that the full bench judgment still stands and the Zambian government can begin to execute the order, such as begin the repatriation process. Let's get SABC News reporter Kenny Mapanga, who's working the story for us this hour. So, Kenny, well, another sort of development coming into the story, making it, a long whirlwind of emotions for the family. What does this now mean?
Indeed. Good morning to you. Apologies, Nkolisi, and to the viewers at home. Essentially, the Lungu family has lost its appeal bid to head to the SCA in order to appeal the full bench judgment that's entitled the Zambian government the right to repatriate the remains of the former president, Edgar Lungu, for the purposes of a state funeral and a burial. You remember that they first tried to do a direct appeal to the Constitutional Court, but they failed to set out the case for that. So they had to return back to the High Court to seek leave to appeal to the SCA. Now, the grounds upon which they raised in the leave to appeal was they stated that you can't contract over a court. And they also argued that the Lungu family had constitutional rights in South Africa that were afforded to them. They also argued that it was unsettling for a foreign state to approach a South African court using foreign laws to claim the remains of the loved ones of the Lungu family, saying that it raised significant questions of law that the appellate court needed to decide on. However, the High Court in its judgment reached a different conclusion, stating that there were no prospects of success on these facts, that if they approached the Supreme Court of Appeal, that they would reach a different conclusion. And they found no merit in this argument that there were significant questions of law that needed to be answered by the appellate court, because you're dealing with a one-time scenario. It's not that you'll often get a scenario where a foreign former head of state, their loved ones are seeking to bury them in foreign land instead of their homeland. They're saying that it's unlikely or very little prospect exists that a court will be confronted with these same set of facts or similar facts that it would need to determine these kinds of questions of law. So the application was dismissed with costs on Scale C. We would say that's a punitive cost order. What this means for the two parties now, because we know there's a parallel process where it seems like there's negotiations, but sometimes it just doesn't carry weight. What it means is that this High Court judgment, the full bench judgment that declared that the Zambian government has the right to repatriate the remains of the former president for the purposes of a state funeral and burial, that judgment still stands. They failed to overturn that judgment. Now, because they still have further options of appeal, they can still try to petition the SCA. If they fail there, they can still try to turn to the Con Court. If the Zambian government is not served with any papers that indicate that that is their intention, then it means that the judgment still stands and the Zambian government can now give effect to that particular order, meaning that they can now start with the repatriation process because that judgment still stands. So all eyes are on the Lungu family to see if they will be serving the Zambian government or not with any further action regarding this, or whether they will go into the negotiations that have been taking place to figure out a way to resolve this dispute. Of course, appeals processes, Olise, are quite lengthy. And this has now been 3 months that the former president has been laying in the mortuary without any resolve to this issue. So he hasn't been laid to rest yet. Of course, there are concerns from both the Zambian government and the family regarding this fact. This process will have to be sped up in order to bring it to a final resolution. But based on the way that we have seen things take place from the beginning of this court challenge to where it brings us now, it is possible that the fight could rage on and we could see further appeal bids, or maybe we will see a final conclusion to this matter after the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria dismissed that leave to appeal bid. But of course, all eyes on the Lungu family now, whether they will serve the Zambian government or not, or will the Zambian government be able to execute this order following the dismissal this morning.
And Kenny Wu, you say it's been 3 months into it now. That's a very lengthy court battle there, to say the least. And, we heard how the court also said that there's no, reasonable prospects for success there. So are there any timelines that are attached to this? Say, for instance, the family is given such and such a time to perhaps serve the government with its intent to continue and take this matter further.
Well, it would be in their best interest if they intend to serve the Zambian government to do so immediately. Otherwise, the Zambian government is in a position where they have a high court judgment that still stands, but hasn't been overturned. They can now execute it. If they're not served with a notice giving them an indication that the appeal bid is continuing to higher courts in our judiciary, then they have every right to execute that particular order and begin that repatriation process.
And Kenny, we saw even with the previous judgment that was made, we saw that the family was quite emotional there after the proceedings. Were they in court today? Did you manage to get a sense of what their reaction was to today's judgment?
This judgment, Olisi, was delivered electronically, meaning it was sent to the relevant parties once the court was ready to deliver it. So it's an electronic judgment. We'll obviously get an indication of where the family is now if they have any action that they serve in the Zambian government. So I think throughout the day, we'll be monitoring that development to see whether the family accepts the circumstances upon which they are finding themselves in currently over the remains of their loved ones, or if they will continue this fight, which will lead to a lengthier appeals process, because there are still 2 options left before this matter can be finalized. But once again, police, it's important to remember, this is a full bench judgment, and it is written by the most senior judges in the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. And of course, if you're going to go and do this appeals process, you have to ensure that there is a reasonable prospect of success. And of course, you can't introduce new facts. You appeal based on what your case was when you first got to the High Court. So this is now, I guess, they failed with the direct appeal bid, and now they failed with this leave to appeal. It's unlikely that any further appeal could lead to some success. It may actually be in the best interest of the family to go back into negotiations with the Zambian government. But once again, all eyes are on the parties to see how they take this matter going forward. It could be that the Zambian government could be served, or you could see the Zambian government executing that order that now still stands because they failed to overturn it.
Right, that's our Kenny Mapanga working that story. Thanks so much.